Hi, welcome back to Elevate. My name is Andrew Chang, founder of Girl Geek X, and with us today we have Boomie, who is a senior director of engineering at Movement Infrastructure Group, with over 20 years of experience with and past roles including engineering leadership at NPR, Capital One, Accenture, and more. So she's involved in organizations that mentor youth and advise people interested in STEM careers, and holds a bachelor of science in mechanical engineering and a master's of science in computer science and an MBA from Wharton. So welcome, Boomie.
Thank you. Wow, love all the hearts that are going up. I haven't even started. So, yes, I'm Bumi, and today I'm going to be talking about reducing bias in the workplace. Sorry. Yay, Girl Geek X. This is my second time as an attendee, my first time as a speaker. Like Angie said earlier, apply to be a speaker if you're interested. Happy to be here. So, what's in this for you, and why should you hear from me? So I would say if you're a leader, this talk hopefully gives practical advice on creating a workplace culture that includes reduced bias. If you're not a leader in title, this still gives practical advice of what to recommend of your leaders or your workplace. But like the keynote speaker said, you don't have to have the leader title to lead something. Okay. And why hear from me? In various roles, I've played a key part in promoting effective workplace cultures, and I've done this at multiple jobs. And reducing bias, of course, is just one part of that. That's not the only part. So it helps to align on what bias means. And the dictionary definition is that it's a tendency towards something or someone. Implicit bias is automatic. We're humans. We can't avoid it because it's hardwired into human nature, and we all have it. So those are the two definitions of bias I'm using today. Implicit bias can lead to explicit biases. It's not the topic for today. And thinking of bias, there's many different types. This image just shows some of them, not even all of them. And if you look, there are things on here that sound positive and negative. There's a beauty bias, there's a height bias. So positive and negative biases both exist, but either one can lead to negative impact. And it's impact that matters. It's impact that we care about. And as I stated, we all have implicit bias. This means we can all experience bias. And so the concepts today to talk about reducing bias helps everybody. And last selling point, it's a win-win situation because reducing bias can actually affect the company's bottom line. If you have positive cultures, you have people working in the high performing zone, and you can be actually more profitable by having that. So now we get to start talking about mindful choices. We can't eliminate implicit bias. We're humans, but we can reduce the impact by using our thinking brain instead of our feeling brain to make mindful choices. And that's the topic for today. And we're going to talk about it specifically for employees, and thinking about an employee, there's various stages of the life cycle, but I have less than 20 minutes. So we're going to stick to a few sections, focusing more on the day-to-day because that's where we spend most of our time. Okay. So a preview of the mindful choices, I'm going to give a lot of information, and the slides will be available later. I'm going to start with talking about some concepts that I consider as the foundation, and then we're going to use that for various parts of the employee life cycle, recruiting, onboarding, most of our time spent on the day-to-day, and also separation and offboarding. So, mindful choices, the foundation. Probably the most important foundation is a willingness. If we don't care, if we don't want to reduce bias, if we think it's not a problem, nothing else matters. Do the same thing, get the same results. So willingness is one of the top foundations. Another foundation is courage, which can lead to growth. This is not easy. Humans are complicated. So courage is needed, and it involves stepping outside of our comfort zone. And I say this is temporarily because when you're trying something new, you initially may have fear, and then maybe you learn and you grow. So you step out of your comfort zone temporarily. And with growth, that can become a new comfort zone. Definitely has for me in my career. things I used to be afraid of, and now I'm not. Okay. Another foundation is what I call tell, show, tell, show. I know there's a saying that says actions speak louder than words, but I believe that tell, show is important because people do not remember everything you say and they do not notice everything you do. So doing both and repeating it is how it sticks and displays the commitment. Another foundation is consistency. It's a lot of keys here, but consistency is one of them as well. And I want to point out that consistency does not mean being identical. People are different, twins are different from each other. So, as an example, it's part of my job to deliver kind feedback to directs and also seek it for myself, of course. And I'm going to be consistent in that I'm delivering that feedback, but my approach is not identical. I have already asked people, do you prefer a heads up or not? And I'm going to meet each person at their preferences. Okay. Another foundation is being proactive. Prevention is way better than cure. Ask questions up front and test for those, test for bias. This can save so much time and so much grief later. Questions like, can this be interpreted as bias? And if so, how can I reduce it? Real life example, at a prior workplace, I didn't worry about salary leaks because we proactively ensured that salaries were equitable and unbiased. And the final foundation that I'm going to talk about today, but I'm sure I could come up with 10 if I wanted to, supporting open communication. It could be a whole talk on its own, but this includes, and it's not limited to things like encouraging honest, respectful feedback, regardless of level. I tell my dogs I'm not the boss, I'm just another person. It includes active listening, seeking feedback, seeking win-win because they exist more often than we think. And even if an organization is not there yet in terms of open communication, it's never too late to start. Okay. So now we've laid the foundation. We've talked about willingness, courage and growth, tell, show, repetition, consistency, being proactive, and open communication. And we're going to start talking about some of the various areas of the journey. Recruiting processes. Obviously, they should be designed to reduce bias, but this is a whole topic. There's books and seminars on this. I have some presentations as well that I can convert to a blog, but because I did want to talk about it here, I've narrowed it down to a top 10, and I'm going to go through a little fast so we can get to the day-to-day. So the top 10, decide on your hiring goals. Be very clear about the must-haves because that helps everybody and it also reduces bias. What's a must-have versus what's desired. Build the recruiting materials to be efficient and also to reduce the chances of bias. Build an efficient bias-free interview process. Communicate that to people, like on job descriptions and wherever, and most of all, follow it. This because you've communicated it, and this is what people are expecting. And be mindful of how you're asking questions and how you're evaluating. For example, if you ask someone, tell me about a time when you did something, and they don't have a chance to talk about potential learnings or how they may do things differently, we may be evaluating them on what their past self did, which is maybe not what their current self does or what they even wanted to do. And then also interview performance bias. In tech, we talk about that with things like how we do whiteboard exercises, etc. Now, be mindful about the interview panel makeup. Here, I really recommend having panel diversity in terms of experience level, working styles, tenure. But because we're in tech, I also really recommend seeking a diversity of genders somewhere in the panel. Even if someone interviews with me, I still usually try to have a woman or non-binary person on the panel, to make sure that they're willing to work well together with a peer. And train the interview panel properly, including how to avoid bias. This is a lesson a lot of people have had to learn. Huddle on candidates, like if I interview people, I don't make the decision by myself. I'm gonna have everyone who interviewed them huddle because you get multiple opinions, and that helps determine whether you should offer, decline, or wait. And tweak the process as needed, both for effectiveness, but also if you find unintentional bias. As I try to make sure I have an unbiased interview approach, but I've still found unintentional bias in there and had to tweak it along the way. Make a fair offer, full stop. Make sure that it's fair to the candidate, but also respects existing employees. I've had times in the past where if I realized I couldn't bring in a candidate at the same level as my existing employees, I've made the case for raising salaries across the board. Okay? And prep the team. This means celebrating their incoming wins, not other things about them. You're hiring them for their skills. So prep the team, to celebrate those incoming skills. I know that was fast, but we're going to go to onboarding. Onboarding is very important for all employees. This could also be its own talk, but it's very important for success. I've read somewhere that most performance issues come from a lack of proper recruiting and or onboarding experiences. So my top tips here: take it seriously, make new people feel welcome, and set them up for success. It saves a lot of time and grief later. All right, so we breezed through recruiting and a little bit of onboarding. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into the day-to-day. So in the day-to-day, one of the tactics is to share expectations. You want everybody, a leader and the person reporting to them should always be in sync about what those expectations are. So if you're not a leader, I recommend you ask your leader for this clarification. For leaders, there's possible avenues for this. These are not the only ones. One possibility is job descriptions, because they can help clarify the job duties. And career ladders can reduce bias if done correctly. They can be more harm than good if not. And then also clarifying evaluations. I've had people say, well, we don't have formal performance reviews. Even if you don't, you're still evaluating people. You're still evaluating employees in one way or another. So it helps to proactively share how those evaluations happen. That's going to help the employees perform. It's also going to help reduce bias during the evaluations. This diagram is straight from my Performance Reviews Can Be Empowering blog. And the diagram and the tips in that blog can apply to unofficial evaluations as well. Unbiased access to resources. Everyone should have the tools and resources they need for their job. Sometimes those will differ, and if that's the case, it's okay as long as it's clearly communicated and tested for bias both before and after that communication. So for example, a salesperson is going to probably need to travel more than a software engineer. So they may have a higher travel budget. But if the software engineer still needs to travel for work, say to a Girl Geek X in real life conference, they should still have the ability to travel. And another part of the day-to-day, access to growth opportunities. These should be shared with everybody to proactively reduce the bias in access. Sometimes, and often this happens with positive intent, we make assumptions about who can and will do work. As an example, if someone's caring for a young child or an ailing parent, we may assume they're less willing or able to take on more work, but we don't know that. They may be, they may not be. So it helps to share the opportunities with everyone and let them say whether they can or not. Also, everybody should have access to growth opportunities they feel good about and flexibility on the job. A lot of words on this slide, but bring the point. It's important to analyze the various areas where employees spend their time and then seek to reduce bias in those places. I have two common examples here. A lot of your engineers are starting to be. Engineers spend a lot of time in code reviews. So this is one place where we should reduce bias. And some of those tactics include collaborating on the standards and guidelines beforehand, using templates if you can, and ensuring code reviews are consistent. Another place we spend a lot of time is in meetings. We're in them, right? So some tactics for reducing the loudest voices bias is ensuring that all voices are heard and acknowledged. This doesn't mean forcing people to talk, but it does. Some people actually don't want to, but it means everybody who wants to talk is heard and acknowledged. It may also mean if there are people who aren't speaking much in meetings but should be, you have that conversation with them privately. Maybe they're sharing a lot of good ideas in private, or maybe their career goals require them to speak more. And also in the day to day, we should seek feedback. Again, I've mentioned a few times that it's the impact that matters. So we want to make sure our intent is leading to the desired impact, because that's what matters. And we want to take action if needed. Feedback's great, it's a gift. Twins can look at the same thing and interpret it differently. Feedback allows you to see how people are interpreting things. And it's important to note that even in the greatest culture, there can be missteps, there can be misinterpretations. So in a good culture, you're seeking feedback and you're also addressing it, because if you don't address it, people are going to stop giving it. Okay. We're imperfect humans, I wish we weren't, but we are. And so there's a high possibility that things are going to go wrong at some point. Maybe intentionally, maybe unintentionally, maybe from individuals, maybe from the whole company. We can't change the past, I've tried, but we can affect the present and the future. And how we handle the issues that happen can matter as much or more than what's already happened. I mean, I've been at places where people, people actually felt more motivated after layoff because the way the company handled it so well. So tactics, talking about tactics here. Don't ignore the issue. Ignoring it makes it worse for all. Your culture is defined by the worst behavior you tolerate. It's not my quote, but I like it. And so we want to address issues effectively. This can be as simple as mediation or as complex as more serious action, training, lots of options here. And it's important to default to believing the reports of bias. If you investigate, anyone can be biased towards anyone else. Okay? And if as a company you've been proactive with practices, guidelines, etc., make sure they're applied consistently. Doesn't mean identical, but it means consistently, because if leaders or other favorites can ignore the rules, might as well not have them. And if issues do happen, this is a good time to revisit the rules and adjust if needed. Almost there, talk lots in the day to day. So now separation. Bias can still happen when an employee is leaving. It can occur at offboarding or separation, and it can happen whether the separation is voluntary or involuntary. It can affect the people leaving, the people still at the company, or others in the future. Of course, I've got tips. So first of all, be respectful. Be aware of both negative and positive biases with the people leaving. And if they're from an underrepresented group in your org, maybe whether or not in society, be mindful of the team perceiving that it was due to external characteristics. I've had multiple Black women tell me that they felt extra pressure to perform because if they didn't work out, they thought the company would never consider another one. Whether or not that was the case, that's a lot of pressure to carry, and other people may be carrying similar pressures. And of course, if a role was eliminated, be mindful of bias that the role didn't matter. Companies cut roles, bring them back for all sorts of reasons. So we still want to be aware of bias even in separation. Conclusion: implicit bias cannot be eliminated, but reducing bias is worth it to employers and employees. And I hope you've seen various growth charts. If you haven't, here is one. Growth is not a straight line. It's going to have dips. And as long as we come back up, we can still get to success. So reducing bias needs mindful choices. And it's important that we have the courage to start and enough heart to finish. So Here's these aren't links. These are some other things for me that are pinned on my LinkedIn. Was on a recent podcast about Excel, Lead, and Empower. I mentioned the performance reviews can be empowering. I've got a job search advice blog. I heard a lot of you saying you're looking for jobs. There's advice there from leaders as well as software engineers. I like salsa dancing. There's parallels between that and my professional life. I'm a parent by adoption, so I have a link to a document by adoption and more is coming. To connect or keep in touch, here are some ways. There's my LinkedIn, my coaching, active in a few Slacks, and slides will be shared later. I think I'm almost out of time. So the last thing I'll say is, not going to go through this slide. I want to end on a good note, but take a screenshot of it, and the slides will be shared later, because if you are experiencing bias, here are some tips for what to do.
Thank you. We're out of time, but thank you so much for that amazing, inspiring talk. Thank you.
Thank you.